Hi there, everyone. Welcome to another Kaijune 2026 stream, our second stream of this month. Got some more Kaijus that we're drawing up today. We'll get started in just a minute. Very important stuff I gotta handle here first, though. Bust open a booster. So if you are joining for the very first time and you are not familiar with our channel, our main channel, or if you're just not sure what the hell it is that I'm doing today, I am working on a month-long challenge called Kaijune, as the name might suggest. I am going to be drawing a kaiju, or a giant monster, or a giant robot for that matter, every day for the month of June. And I have a prompt list that I'm going off of. You can find that prompt list on our main YouTube channel on Subjectively. You can find it on the Discord, which is linked in the description. You can find it on our Unveil, and you can find it on our Instagram, well, my Instagram. And doing one illustration per day based on each of those one-word prompts. Now, as you can see, it's only the 2nd of June, but I already have 4 done. I'm kind of trying to get ahead of it a little bit because it helps when I'm editing videos and if I have to travel or anything, to have a bit of a backlog done so I don't fall behind. So today, despite the fact that it's only June 2nd, I'm actually going to be working on day 5 on the challenge list. And the prompt for day 5, I believe, is jointed. I'm going to double check. I've had jointed in my head, and I've had an idea for a crab design. Yes, it is jointed. I'm pretty sure when I put jointed on this prompt list, I was like, I always try to come up with a new word, a new prompt that will allow me to draw a crab, because I always want to draw a crab. And yes, jointed may very well be a good excuse to draw a crab, and I have an idea that I like in my head that I think I want to execute today. We are going to do that in just a moment. Before we do that, I have a booster that I can open in Pokemon TCG Pocket, and you know, when you gotta here, I'll show you guys. So let's see what I got here. I'm not even looking. I'm looking here. Do you guys know you can open boosters like this? Pokemon TCG Pocket. Not an ad, by the way. I just like this ad. Okay, that looks like nothing. I just want Koraidon. Like, I mean, I want the full art, but I want a Koraidon to use in one of my decks. I haven't even pulled, just like the regular Koraidon EX. Okay, that was a nothing burger. Shame. I just want to make a Koraidon deck. I haven't pulled a single Koraidon. Mike is super quiet. Let me see if I can help with that. You know what it is? I hate this stupid fucking cam. I'll tell you what it is. The problem is... There we go. Is that better? Testing, 1, 2, 3. I'll tell you what happened. Now it looks like I'm actually clipping a little bit. That's too good. What happens is this stupid webcam. I don't want to shit talk my microphone. I like my microphone. Oh, I'm making it worse. I don't want to shit talk my microphone. My microphone is very nice. I like my microphone. This sucks. It's just not a good webcam. And it has a microphone built into it. And sometimes when I start up my computer and I'm running a program like OBS, it picks up this microphone on the webcam instead of my actual microphone. And I don't know why it defaults to that. It drives me crazy. Alright. Thank you for telling me, by the way. I always, there's always one thing or another that I miss when I'm setting up the streams, and stupid fucking microphone. Now I'll remember to always double check that. Alright, so we're going to start on day 5, which is jointed. How would I actually write jointed in there? Well, hopefully my little introduction was at least somewhat audible, so that you guys caught the gist, but I'll explain it again when more people join exactly what it is that I'm doing here, and what the goal is for today. If I could finish this on this stream, like a 3-hour illustration, that would be great. I don't know if that's what we're gonna get, but that would be the goal. All right, so if you weren't here yesterday, I'll take you through a little bit of my process since we're starting straight from scratch. So what I've been doing to try to make these illustrations a little bit more quickly, a little bit more efficiently, is starting a process, doing a new process for illustration that requires a lot less polish in the actual line work stage. So I've been kind of just, roughly sketching shapes for just to start off, and trying to be kind of sparing with my lines, trying to not make anything look too cluttered or scribbly. Like when you work gesturally, obviously that means, there's going to be a lot of sort of fluid, messy looking lines. But it doesn't mean that your underdrawing should be so scribbly that you can't make sense of it. It's still got to be useful to you as an underdrawing. So, I have an idea in my head already for this prompt, jointed. And I kind of have like a pose already figured out. If I didn't, maybe I would go in, go onto Google or something, or Pinterest, and try to find a pose to give me a little inspiration. But I kind of already have some inspiration. I kind of already have a general idea of what I want to do. I draw a lot of crabs, and excuse me, while that is certainly not going to change, what I do want to change is maybe the kinds of crabs that I draw inspiration from. And one kind of crab that I really like, but I don't often draw, is a fiddler crab. I'm sure these crabs have different kinds of names depending on where you are in the world. But where I'm from, we call them fiddler crabs. And you probably recognize them. They're usually pretty small. They're mostly terrestrial. They live by the water. They don't really live in the water. They don't swim. And they have, the males at least, have one claw that is significantly larger than the other. Now, most crabs and decapods in general have asymmetrical claws. Usually in all species of crabs, kind of like how we have a dominant hand and a non-dominant hand, one of their claws is used for grabbing, pinching, pulling, and holding, while the other claw is used for crushing and more of an offensive tool. The fiddler crabs take it to an extreme where they use their one claw, their dominant claw, as sort of a display, a sexual display to attract females. And it doesn't really serve much purpose aside from that. Like, it is, it couldn't pinch you, but I mean, they're pretty small, so like even the big claw doesn't hurt that much. But it's mostly as a display. All right, so like, but that's just an animal. Like, fiddler crabs just exist. So that's like my basic. But what I really wanted to do, so part of what I wanted to do with this particular prompt is get a little bit more fun with my silhouettes. Have a little bit more fun with my silhouettes. Because a lot of the illustrations I've done thus far kind of fun designs, but kind of uninteresting silhouettes. You know, it's just something that I've noticed thus far with my designs. So I wanna get a little bit more dramatic, a little bit more exciting with this silhouette, and I think that's part of why I picked a fiddler crab, because it's asymmetrical, and there's this very large, oversized body part, and jointed crustaceans, arthropods in general, with their weird jointed, multi-jointed legs. A lot of fun shapes you can make in there. So I also want to make sure that the actual legs themselves create some interesting shapes down here. I think I want to give him a second pair of claws. Oftentimes when I'm designing a kaiju around a real-life animal, I find that I always want to give them extra limbs. And it's mostly because I just imagine, a massive creature, this size, kaiju size. If it had the same adaptations of a much smaller animal, it wouldn't, how the hell would it reach the ground? How would it be able to reach things? So I'll give him a second pair of claws, so that if it wants to reach down and grab a little person below it, it has a smaller set of claws that it can reach with. And then the other thing that I want to do with this is I want to paint some crystals. Someone was asking me yesterday what kinds of things I really like to draw. And I really like to draw crystals. Now, crystals are a subject matter that I think I need a good reference for it, but it's so easy to find a good reference for, like, crystals and gemstones and shiny, pretty rocks. Not only is it a popular subject in painting and illustration, but it's also just, like, there are just so many. It's an easy thing to get reference images of. Even, like, artificial crystals, even, like, a little plastic one that you could buy off of Amazon. I should actually have one of those. That's a nice. I like collecting things that I can use as, like, reference in my illustrations, and I feel like one of those little, like, plastic, $3 crystals you get off Amazon or something would be a good addition to my collection. So this approach that I'm using partially to save time, but I also think it will benefit me in the long run with my illustrations and my process for illustration. I'm still kind of figuring it out. And yesterday I was working on this guy, which I finished. And, I was talking about how when it comes to illustrating machinery, I kind of... I don't want to say BS it. Ad-lib it, I think, is a better sounding way to describe it. And that kind of rough sketching process helps a lot with that. But I found myself still spending a lot of time in the final rendering stage because some things were just not clearly described enough for me to make sense of them, and I kind of had to improv again with colors. I think I still saved time, compared to doing the line work and then doing the colors. But what I took away from that is I need to spend just a little bit more time in the rough sketch stage. So, like, where I am now in the underdrawing. Just kind of being a little bit more decisive with my mark making. So I want this claw to be kind of crystalline. But I think actually at this point what I want to do, because this is like more or less the silhouette, and at the very least it's all that I want to do without some reference. So this is all without reference. I've drawn enough crabs in my life that I can draw a crab from memory pretty well. Oh, you know, also I want to give it a little crown. I love when crabs have little crowns, because a lot of crabs, the top front of their carapace sort of makes a crown shape. And I really like that. I might also, I might do that actually right now. I might take the symmetry tool. This is another good way to save time, at least in the sketching process. But I think I might take my symmetry tool here and just, I can change things around later, but just because crabs have a lot of symmetry in their heads, I also want to make this a little lower so that the eyes actually break over the top of the head. Like that. Okay. Let's clean this up a little bit, as I was just saying. Gestural, but not too sloppy. We don't really want the sloppy toppy here. Ooh, the teeth on the inside of the claws were crystal. I like that. Yeah, because crabs have those little... Oh, I like that. I was thinking that there could be, like, crystals, like, you know, crabs kind of have, like, bumpy claws. I was kind of thinking, like, crystals lining the top of the claws, too, but also, like, the actual teeth of the claws being crystals. Oh, and I could make, like, a little rainbow. I love rainbows. Any excuse to make a rainbow. Okay, that's good. But I'm going to hold off on adding that until I have a reference, because as much as often as I draw crabs, the claws are the parts that always trip me up. The crab claw anatomy is a little unintuitive. And I just want to make sure I do it justice, because the crab claw is like the coolest part. And also the underside of the head here. I want to get a better reference for that. Okay, so now we're going to jump over to Google. We are going to... Let's find some different kinds. Well, let's start with a fiddler crab. Should I give it really big stalk eyes like this? I kind of like the shape that creates. Yeah, I might give it big stalk eyes like that. That's kind of fun. Oh, there's some beautiful fiddler crabs. The ones that I'm familiar... This is like the ones that I'm familiar with. That live around where I live. Not quite... Oh, actually, they look like this too. Sometimes they have these purple colors on the backs of their shells. But some of these are very, very flamboyant. That one's very flamboyant. And that's nice. That's part of why I love crabs, is they can be very, very colorful. Look at that. That's crazy looking. That's some nice jewel tones right there. We can hold on to that. And I also want to get a spider crab. Technically, they're not true crabs, but I like the way the undersides of spider crabs look. So I usually like to use them for reference. I don't need like a Japanese spider crab, just like a regular. Oh, that's good. That's really good. Yeah, look at the underside of that thing. Isn't that cool looking? So I'll use that. Whoa, that's an awesome picture. The spider crab on the whale fall. I'd frame that, put that in my bathroom. Look at that freaking weird looking guy. That guy's also weird. These are the kind of spider crabs that I get around where I live. They're kind of ugly. And they hurt. They have really spiky shells. They don't really pinch you. But if you step on one, you won't crush it. You won't kill it. It'll just hurt. I don't know if people eat those. They don't look very delicious. Then again, most things you pull out of the ocean don't really look delicious. People eat them anyway. And let's get some... I bet if I look up crystal crab, I bet I could find... Well, I'll probably find some AI shit. Oh yeah, there's a magic card. How could I forget? I'll save that image. That's a fun image. I like the crystal crab. Is this an actual species of crab, the crystal crab? I didn't actually know that. Looks like there's an actual species of crab called a crystal crab. And surprisingly, no AI art. I was really picturing some AI generated images there. Let's just look up colorful crystals. Yeah. Just go ahead and grab that. These look like more like gemstones, if you ask me. Oh, what the fuck? Did I save that to files? There we go. Oh, that's good there. That is nice. That is some good stuff. Yeah, I want some really fake looking crystals here. Some super saturated. I like that. Yeah, these are good. Ooh, yeah. Yeah, those are some nice colors too. Ooh, some tourmaline. That's a beautiful stone. I love tourmaline. That's nice too. Faces on it. If you're just joining us, I'm on day 5 right now. 5. The prompt is jointed, and I am drawing a crystal crab. Giant crystal crab creature. And let's just crab claw. Let's just grab just like a nice general image to get the, I mean, different crab. Whoa! No way. Think that's real? That is a damn cool fossil if that's real. A whole opalized crab claw. God, if I was rich, this is the kind of stuff I would spend my money on. Should I buy this opalized crystal crab claw? Let's see. Oh, it's just an Instagram post. That kind of makes me feel like it's not real. When I click on a link and it's just an Instagram post, it always makes... I mean, it looks really cool if it is, in fact, real and not an AI-generated image. I'm seeing a lot of these. Yeah, no, this must be... Okay, yeah, no, that's definitely fake. Okay, this must be something that's like popular on social media, so AI is generating a lot of images of it. Yeah. This is there is no way. This is on Facebook. Yeah. That's a good way to tell. Like, this is very convincing. I mean, I can be a little scrutinous with the actual anatomy of the claw, but for the most part and it's just like if you know about opalized fossils, like there are never opalized fossils that are this complete. So that's just general knowledge is a great way to tell AI. Another great way to tell AI is if you find like an image like this and it's just on like Facebook, it's fake. Maybe it's not AI, maybe it's like a sculpture or something. This is definitely AI. And now that I'm like seeing like this is like it keeps popping up over and over again, like this one is a little bit more clearly fake because that just doesn't look like a real crab claw. But like it's kind of like the same image over and over again. Not exactly the same image. That is so fake. See, this one they got a little bold with it. Like this one is pretty clearly fake. Like this, I was ready to believe this one. I was ready to believe that one. But then I clicked on it and it was instant. Because like the thing is if this was found anywhere in the world and anyone posted about it and it was real, it would be on some sort of science news blog or journal or something, because this is an incredible find if it was actually real. Damn. Okay. I got super distracted there. My bad. I'm gonna save this image anyway. Oh no, it's actually too blurry. That's the other thing too. Instagram, when you find them on Google Images, they're just too blurry. Just grab these big stone crab claws. Alright. So now let's go back over here. The other thing I want to do is I kind of want to warp this a little bit, make it even crazier. Like I said, I really want to play with silhouette and get real crazy with it. Alright, I'm going to start by fine-tuning this claw. So let's also, just so I know how to format, I'm going to take my background here. I'm just going to bring it over here. And this way I can scale it properly before I start working into it. Actually pretty good already. I don't really need to change much. Okay. Now I'm going to make a little reference layer here. And let's start with a claw. So the thing is, even though I'm inspired by Fiddle of Crabs, well, actually, I really like the shape of this claw. That's got a very cool shape to it. Let's try this. So that pose is a little bit different. So I'm actually gonna... This is gonna change that. And it's quite bulbous. I'm gonna actually just get rid of all of that. Because this part where it like sort of attaches to the rest of the arm is actually quite bulbous. And you got the little sort of joint here. That's the thing about crab claws. It's a good thing to sort of keep in mind when you're drawing crab claws. There's only one joint in a crab claw. It only opens at one place. So if you can imagine if your hand, this part of your hand, sorry, you can't see. Imagine if this part of your hand, your palm and your four fingers were all fused into one big bone, right? Because crabs are they have exoskeletons. They don't have bones on the inside. So imagine this was all one big bone. And then there was a singular joint here, and your thumb, let's imagine it was as long as the rest of your hand, your thumb is the only point of articulation. So there's a point of articulation here in your wrist that allows it to go like this, and then there's a point of articulation here where your thumb is. And that's how a crab claw works. This part is all one solid piece. This doesn't, it can move up and down, it can move around, but it can't, this part doesn't close. This part is all one solid piece. And this is the only part that opens and closes. So when you're drawing a crab claw, you can kind of just do one big shape like this, right? And that's all one piece. Yo. And then, that's too sloppy. Let's be a little bit more decisive with our lines, Jack. Come on. And here. And there. Okay, that's all one piece. Yo. Guy go. Then, maybe I made this too big now. Let's make it a little bit smaller. Just a little bit. I'm going to have to get rid of those antennas too because they are creating an unhappy tangent there. Let's just do this eraser. We can put them back in later. Then I'm going to my second part. Now this part actually opens and closes. So you have to have a little bit of room there, a little bit of room. And this part opens. And it's about the same length on a fiddler crab, it looks like. And so it opens there, like that. And I might also make this just a little bit smaller like that. A little bit more narrow. Bring it down. Bring it in a little bit. I like that shape. See, this is good. This is what I wanted. I wanted some good silhouettes. This is a good silhouette. And now what I can do is, if I want to open this up just a little bit, I can just pivot that in this joint. Now it's a little bit more open. All right, now let's work into this just a little bit more. Yes, I'm going to remember those fun eye stalks. I love those little eye stalks. Is it okay if we posted a kaiju for, say, day 2, but I posted it tomorrow or the next day? Oh, yeah, absolutely. You definitely do not have to do one every day. And if it takes you longer than the month of June, that's also totally fine. This is drawing a different illustration every day for an entire month is very challenging. I know a lot of illustrators that would not be able to do it despite their skills. Like, it is a challenge. I mean, this is more so than a lot of other things that are called challenges. This is really a challenge. This will test you. But, you know, it's not worth putting in the work if you're just going to make yourself miserable with it. And, you know, you're not going to be happy with the work you do anyway. So, you know, in that case, just do what you can. Do what you feel like is actually productive for you. You know, that'll help you make art that you can be happy with, that you are proud to share with others. And yet, do not feel restricted by the timeline. You know, you have to sort of be able to understand your own abilities as an illustrator going into a project like this, going into a challenge like this, because it's not easy. It is certainly not easy. So the fiddler crab claws do have teeth, but they're much smaller. So I'm going to play them up just a little bit. Make them a little sharper because this isn't just your average run-of-the-mill fiddler crab. This is a kaiju. This is a monster. This is a freak. And actually, maybe, ooh, you know what would be kind of fun, actually? I'm gonna actually introduce a secondary concept here. Might be kind of fun. put a big face on the claw, make it look like the damn thing has a second head. I could give it like a crystal eyebrow on this claw. Make that eye a little bit bigger, actually. So this is, you know, the part where you can kind of deviate a little bit from your reference, get a little cute with it, so to speak. You know, start coming up with some ideas that are a little less real, a little less plausible. I think I'm going to make this whole top claw like the jointed claw. Jointed pincer, whatever you call. I don't know if there's a word for like each individual, like the whole part is a claw, but then what do you call like each individual pincer? I don't know what to call it. Sort of like kind of a quick and easy way to add a little bit more monster to your design is just add an extra limb, add an extra eye. And then I think the rest of it will look kind of like it's almost made out of stone. feel like the the jump from crab to like elemental crab made out of stone and crystals is a little done. I feel like crystal crab, stone crab, like I've seen it before, because it's just kind of like it's kind of an easy connection to make. Crabs have these powerful exoskeletons, often look like they're made out of stone. Oops, I moved that drawing guide. Let's put that back. Okay, now I want to go into the head here. I'll turn the drawing guide back on, actually. And I quite like the stalk eyes. Although I don't think I can draw these symmetrically, because this one has to kind of come down a little bit because of claw. I'll give this a little more space, a little bit more breathing room. While I'm thinking about, as I draw these, I'm thinking about, the story that I might write for them. And I was, because of the, oh, those are too big. They need to look a little more slender. They need to be more slender, man. Because of the world of this, of the Roiling Revelry, that story that I've created. Some of these kaiju designs are, the actual character itself is killed, is destroyed. The first kaiju I made was killed. And I know people don't like that. They're like, oh, it's dead. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. Personally, it is sad. That's kind of the point. But I like how people are like, oh, I want it to be friends with it. I'm like, you can still be friends with it. It's not any more real. The fact that I made the character dead doesn't make it less possible to actually be friends with it. You can still be friends with it because it's, it doesn't exist. But I have a feeling people won't like... I wouldn't like this one. He's so cute. I don't want this guy to be dead. But he might be. I don't know. I have to figure out what the story is going to be. Oh, right. I have symmetry mode turned on. I'll wait to do that until I'm done with the symmetry tool. Crustal is pretty good. The names that I give these kaijus, I try to imagine, what setting, what the people who have encountered this particular creature in the world, in the universe, like what they might call it and why they might call it that. Like the first kaiju I made was called Matakame, and it was named by the Japanese military that were, they needed like a code name to call it by as they were trying to figure out some way to destroy it. And, I imagine that a lot of these would probably be named by some sort of military operative, but maybe some of them would also have names like if they were discovered by someone before the military. Maybe they would have more affectionate or quirky sounding names. I'm also considering, the time period, and what kinds of things were popular at that time. A lot of in Western culture in the turn of the century up until the 1920s, there was a lot of fascination with the Greeks and the Romans. A lot of things were named either Latin or Greek, and usually named after mythological figures. Yeah, I mean, in English, we use Latin for a lot of root words, but then in languages like Spanish and Italian, the Latin is pretty much the derivation, or rather, they are a derivation of Latin. Especially if you're in any field of science, Latin and Greek. A lot of animal names, plant names, designations in general. Taxonomy. Even the word taxonomy, comes from Latin. This is going to be a much quicker illustration than I think a lot of my other ones. You know, it's got some fun shapes, but there's generally just less to paint. You know, the body itself is pretty small. You know, most of the attention, so to speak, is going to be in the claw, but even that is kind of thin and narrow. That's a good way to save time too if you want to catch up on a project like this and you're feeling a little bit behind. You know, design a character that has a lot of like thin delicate body parts. Just takes a lot less time to render that. I guess also the reason why this won't take as much time is just because I'm much more comfortable drawing crabs. Like a lot of the illustrations I've done thus far are a little bit out of my comfort zone. You know, machinery in general, horses, even turtles. I don't really draw turtles all that often. think most of this Kaiju's body will be dark so that we can have a focus on its crystalline claws. You know, I'm so into this one that I feel like I can even start thinking about what my next one is. Because, you know, conceptually I feel like I got this guy figured out. Next one is Mercury. Oh, I want to do a goo monster for that. Or maybe a goo robot. That'd be kind of cool. Hey, 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 hey. I will not be done with this challenge by day 15. Trust me on that. The thing about these month-long drawing challenges is even when you have a really good head start, you always end up having something that sets you back a little bit. You know, I want to make videos this month, you know, to showcase not just my Kaijune designs, but also some of our favorite designs from the Unveil page, you know, that you guys have been doing. And putting together, editing a video, that takes a lot of time. And that can often slow down. You know, I can lose a day or two, or 3, honestly, doing that. So that's part of why I'm doing multiples per day, because I also have to turn these into I mean, I don't have to turn these into videos, but I want to turn these into videos. But that's a whole extra step on top of doing 30 illustrations. Because as much as I would love to just draw something every day for a month, you know, I can't make money doing that, and unfortunately this is my full-time job, so I gotta be able to balance it out with some practicality, some good old-fashioned practicality. Great way that you guys can help out, you know, help support me during this month so that I can just work on cool Kaijune illustrations. Subscribing to this channel, subscribing to our main channel, making sure watch all of our videos, Make sure you tell your friends about it. If you want to help us out even more, you can become a YouTube channel member or a Patreon supporter. Patreon would actually help out a lot this month. If you guys wanted to pop over to our Patreon, I believe I have that linked in the description of these videos. If not, I'll make sure to add it. It is linked in the descriptions of our videos on our main channel, so you can definitely check that out. But that would make this month run a lot more smoothly in general. And if you are participating in the Kaijune challenge, kind of a win-win situation, if you would like to help support us, and you would like to up your illustration game, you can buy our brushes off of our Gumroad. That is linked in the description. The brushes I'm using right now are brushes that were custom made by Claire, and I use them for all of my illustrations. So if you're looking for new brushes to enhance your illustration game and you want to help us out, that would be an awesome win-win scenario. Oh, excuse me. I'm gonna do a big stretch there. Clean this up too much. Sort of what I learned from the last illustration that I did for this challenge is, like, you don't want to clean it up too much, but you also don't want to leave it too messy. But just like areas where you feel like you're going to need to render in more details once you get to the color. You know, just for the sake of clarity, you know, for your own sake. Because when you're sketching, you know, it doesn't have to look nice and pretty and clean. It just needs to be legible to you so that you are able to use your underdrawing to help inform your final illustration. If your underdrawing is too messy that you feel like you can't understand what it is that what the marks you made are supposed to represent, then you got to clean it up. And that can also mean going back in, going over it, you know, if you're working digitally on a separate layer, or if you're working traditionally with a separate medium, and cleaning up the lines, you know, separately. I like to use the same layer that I did the underdrawing on, and kind of just use a higher opacity brush and a little bit of the eraser tool. Alright, so now that's more or less done. Let's center it again. Make it just a little bit smaller so that it actually looks like it's standing on that ground that I've made there. I'm going to go in here. I'm going to take the technical pen.
Thanks for that, tough guy.
I mean, the thing is that you have to remember about illustration is that using line art is just one of many, many, many different ways to render an illustration. You know, I think a lot of people in our generation particularly, you know, they read like the how to draw manga and the how to draw comics books when they're younger. And those kinds of illustrations typically, not always, but typically and traditionally rely on an underdrawing and then line art and then colors. But that's because those methods, those techniques for illustration were very conducive to meeting deadlines. Because you have one person doing the storyboards, you have one person doing the illustrations, you have one person doing the inking, you have one person doing the coloring, and you can pump out a lot of products that way. And that's sort of become a look that a lot of people like. But that's just one way to make illustrations. A lot of illustrators don't use line art at all. They have an underdrawing, and then they paint over it. And there's no lines involved. Like my wife Claire, she doesn't use lines for her illustrations. She does an underdrawing, kind of roughly sketched, just to figure out shapes, and then everything else, all the other information, form, light, texture, that is all described with brushstrokes that are not, you know, lines per se, not draftsman's lines. Where am I missing this here? And what I'm going to end up doing with this illustration is, once I've just sort of filled all of this in and do a little bit of color rendering, I'm going to merge them all into one layer and treat the lines and my painted brush strokes as one piece of art. Sort of bring them all together to describe my shapes. That was part of the problem, wasn't it? Oh, and speaking of those videos that I want to make this month, you know, they're going to be like lore videos. They're going to be explaining, you know, there's going to be kind of like read-throughs of all of the stories that I've been writing. They're not going to have like my breakdown of my process and everything like that. So if you have questions about about my process, how I illustrate and stuff, be sure to ask me during these streams, because this is a great, I can actually answer you live. And you know, if you do have any inquiries as to, you know, what choices I make when I illustrate and why, this is a great place to do it. I can answer them live in real time. Claire does have an Instagram. Yes, I can link that for you. She does not make videos to share her artwork, but she does have an Instagram. I can actually link that. This is... That's Claire's Instagram there. How do I decide where each shadow goes? Well, when you're thinking about light, you have to understand where your light is coming from. So I've been lighting all of these characters from underneath, and just because I feel like that makes them look bigger, you know, that's kind of like a fun, like, monster lighting, because, you know, if you imagine something this enormous, there's nothing a human can make that would, you know, be able to shine light on the top of it other than maybe like a helicopter or something. So just in general, you know, having a top-down light source, I think, is a fun way to make something look larger, more monstrous. So because my light is coming from underneath, that means that, you know, if you have any object, let's use, let's say, okay, so let's use this Appleton. You know, if the light is coming from above it, that means the light, you know, light doesn't pass through. This is a solid object, so the shadows would be underneath it. Light's coming from up here, shadow will be behind it, because the light doesn't reach this part of it. That's the solid figure. Now I'm going to also render crystals on this. Light passes through crystals, so that's a different bucket of chicken. But it's just helpful to think about where light comes from, how it passes through or bounces off objects, and shadows are just the absence of light. So if light is not passing through something, if an object, a solid object, is blocking light, then it's going to cast a shadow. So, you know, an easier way to think about that is wherever there isn't light, there is darkness. And here, the light is shining from underneath, so the darkness will be on the top of the creature. There's no light coming from up there. Now, that's a very simple, you know, there's only one source of light. In this one, this first one, I actually had two sources of light. So I had the light coming from underneath it here. Oh, here, let me... You guys can't see me gesticulating. It had light, this red light coming from underneath it, right? Sort of lighting it. But then we had this cooler light source coming from back here. Now, let's imagine it's completely dark. There's no other light sources except for this one and this one. So the stronger light source, this one, coming from right underneath it, is going to be casting shadows, so to speak, on... You know, the light is not making it to this point, right? This is all dark here. The light is not reaching this part of the body. But there's also a weaker light source behind it, and it's catching just on the edges of it. And everything else is dark. How would I draw lighting from underwater? Object is floating on the surface of the water, but the lighting is coming from below. I mean, it would be pretty much the same. The only difference is when light is shining through water, it refracts because the surface of the water refracts light. So I would definitely find some reference for that. You could definitely find some good references of, like, just literally if you just type like light from underwater, and you find like a picture of a boat like this, you know, and so, well, that light is shining from on the boat. It's not shining from underwater. Well, you'd have to do some digging for it, I guess. I thought there would be more. It'd be easier to find. Well, I mean, this is the light isn't technically coming from underwater. It's coming from lights on the boats shining down underwater. But still, you know, you get the same thing. There again, there are two light sources here, right? You know, there's the blue light emanating from the boat. That's actually kind of refracting off of the water back up onto the boat, right? There. But then there's also a yellow light, probably from on a dock or something, that's shining over here. And that's catching on this side of the boat, but everything else is dark, right? So those are your two light sources. So the one thing this is a good example of how light is refracted. This is light shining down into the water, but you can see that the bottom, the shore, the seabed, however you want to call it, the riverbed, the seabed, that is having light refracted through the waves coming down into it. So you get these weird shapes from where the waves are kind of reaching their crests, the tiny little ripples in the water, and the light shining through that down onto the surface. And a similar thing would happen if light was shining up from underwater onto an object. Oh, you know what's a good way? You could look at Pacific Rim, because there's a lot of light coming from underwater in Pacific Rim. Find some scenes from this, or one of the two movies. Maybe just watch through the whole thing, because it's a fun movie. It's fun to watch, and because there's a lot of scenes that happen at night, and the light is coming from either the mech or the kaiju. So maybe watch through it and find some scenes where you're like, oh, that's perfect. That's exactly what I'm looking for. And in fact, I think I will add a secondary light source here. When you're doing two different sources of light, it helps if they're two different colors. So like I have the blue cool light coming from underneath it, and maybe there'll be this warm yellow light coming from over here. As an illustrator, it really helps, to always be thinking about things like light and shape, and noticing them in real life. I find myself looking at my hands a lot. Like if you look at your hand right now, no matter what kind of lighting situation that you are in right now, you'll get a great example of how light interacts with the solid objects. And hands are interesting too, because depending on the intensity of the light and the color of your skin, and other things like your physical health, light passes through in some places, reflects off of it in other places, changes what appears to be the color of your hand, and I find that very interesting. So always pay attention to things like that, just day to day, even when you're not drawing. Just think about how light interacts with things. Now let's get some fun crystals. And it never hurts to have reference. In fact, I would go so far as to say is it's always important to have reference. Now with things like crystals, it's lighting is a very different story, because light passes through crystals, it's refracted inside of crystals. Sometimes it bounces off faces of crystals. A crystal is never one color. The way light interacts with gemstones and crystals, they're always going to be creating a lot of different colors. Sometimes, subtle colors, as opposed to like a full rainbow spectrum of colors, but they're never just going to be one color. So if you look here, actually, you can see, excuse me, where the shadows are being cast here. Light is coming from top left, right? It's shining from down there. And the way the light is catching inside these crystals, now I have no idea how these crystals are made. They look very artificial. They might even be CGI rendered models, but it works. This is accurate to how crystals refract light. And so you can see the light kind of bouncing off all of the surfaces, not just on the outside, but on the inside as well. So this light that's coming from the top down, it's actually getting trapped inside in the bottom of the crystal here. And it's also bouncing off the top here. This flat surface here is reflecting the light, and it's making this kind of desaturated, much lighter, slightly less pretty color. A little bit more of a white color. So let's say if we have that yellow light source coming from on our piece from the top right here, we could make this, kind of take this desaturated, much lighter color, and on this crystal face, just completely make that white. And then maybe on a slightly darker one, slightly darker color, take this here, like that. But now directly underneath it, this one, the light isn't passing through underneath that. So on this face, it actually looks like it's darker. But the light is shining from above it, so the light is going to get trapped underneath it, right? That's what we were saying before. Maybe we can even bring some more hue into it. It's nice when you're coloring something like a crystal to, not use a lot of blacks when you're trying to create darkness. Use a darker color that still is very saturated. Now over here, this maybe is even darker, so we take an even darker color, maybe go into the purple spectrum here. We kind of color this like that. Maybe bring a little bit of that red back in there. And then over here, again, it's going to be darker underneath that brightest part. Like that. And then here is still catching a little bit of light, so we'll go back to this desaturated color. Like that. That's too bright. Like that. This face can almost stay the same. And these faces of the crystal, I drew those out with my lines, with my underdrawing. So I sort of have it all planned out where it's going to fall on there. Take a little bit of that lighter yellow, come from underneath it. And now this crystal shifts in color as it gets further up. We want to make sure not to lose that. If you're working digitally, it's nice. You can just use the dropper tool and just sort of extract the colors and how they interact with each other as you move up. And this one's going to be real dark. Not quite as saturated, maybe a little bit more like that. This one's at the top here, so maybe this one's a little bit brighter. This one would also be pretty dark, but again, moving into more of the pinker tones there. And this is more or less at the top, so now we're in the pinker colors. Let's use a saturated, brighter, but a pinker color here. maybe just the corner of this is catching the light and refracting it. Now, actually what I've done here doesn't look correct. And the reason why that is because the light is coming from... Oh, let me... You guys can't see where I'm pointing. Because the light is coming from here, it would actually... Really, you'll notice on these two, it only catches at on one face. More or less one face. And that's the face that is closest to that light source. That light source is going to hit and bounce right off of it. So... The light source is really only coming from here, so it really only hit off of this. It shouldn't really be hitting off of anything up here. So this can be lighter, but it would not be refracting or reflecting that light in the same way as that face down here. So I'm going to make this not super dark, but definitely a little bit darker. Oh, whoops. Let's just get rid of that. Again, it never hurts to throw some extra colors in there. Play with hues. Get a lot of different hues in there. Oh, yeah, you could top me off. Thank you. Again, that's way too bright. Pretty much leave it at the saturation that it is, honestly. Alright, and now what we can do is sort of replicate that light that's being captured down at the bottom. So just these little tiny highlights down at the bottom where the light is bouncing off the bottom of those fractals. Just a little tiny bit of light. We don't want it to be too powerful because that then will compete with that strongest light source. So we don't really want it to be the exact same lightness as where the light is breaking right off of it. And again, all the color relativity in places that are darker, you don't have to use the brightest color. Thank you, my love. You don't have to use the brightest color. You can use maybe a mid-tone from one of the other faces. And again, it's easy if you're working digitally because you can just color drop that. And there's that light getting caught underneath it. And that really sells the crystal look. And then even we could take that same color and we can kind of spill it over and have it be casting, well, not casting light, but reflecting light onto the rest of this claw. You know, the light is passing through it and kind of creating this warm yellow light that can illuminate the claw itself. Excuse me. And that was the biggest crystal, so now the rest is going to be easy. The rest we just kind of do what we did before. Take this lighter color. Put that right there. Take that nice pink color. Put that up there. Take this sort of mid-tone. Put that right in there. We can clean this up a little bit. Like that. Again, we can sort of take this, have it cast a little, reflect a little bit of light on there. take this sort of tooth of the claw here that's in the background, and I'll kind of make that mostly this sort of orangey color as the light of the crystal is kind of shining into that. And like we said, this part of the crab is like the stony texture, so there are still faces and different planes of light on this claw. But unlike the crystals, light's not passing through it. It's either bouncing off of it or not going through at all, so it's just dark. So for this, we can save ourselves a little time and just kind of fill them all the way in using that blue light source that's coming from underneath. Thank you. Thank you for saying my crab monster is amazing. I always love drawing crabs. Always a big fan of crabs. And if you are just joining and you're not sure exactly what the hell it is that I'm doing here, I am working on Kaijune 2026. It's a month-long drawing challenge where I design a giant monster or robot every day for the month of June. It is only the second day of June, but I am currently working on my 5th illustration. A little ahead of the game right now, which is always a good thing when you're doing a challenge like this, because you never know when you might fall behind the curve. That certainly happens from time to time. Let me tell you. Are you letting me tell you? Is the crystal alive taking over the crab's body? Oh, that's interesting. I don't know. It does kind of look like that, doesn't it? Like the crystal is giving the claw sentience. That'd be kind of cool. I was thinking about what these kaijus are, you know, why they're here on Earth, where they came from, why they're attacking humans. Because unlike some of my previous monster designs, you know, stories and worlds about giant monsters, these kaijus are pretty, or I guess they're Goliaths. They're not kaijus, is what they're called in this universe. These Goliaths are pretty unfriendly. They are not really empathetic creatures. They are hell-bent on destruction. You know, less of a, you know, 1970s Godzilla and more of a Shin Godzilla, so to speak. Sort of this mindless entity, this force of nature. Or is it nature? Because one of the things I was thinking of is that these Goliaths are actually manifestations of human fear brought to life, given form. And perhaps the only way to combat them is to somehow do away with human fear. That's just an idea I had. Just kind of thinking about it. You know, I always like when design, character design or otherwise, is a little bit more metaphorical than literal. You know, I like doing like speculative evolution and like trying to create a whole ecosystem. You know, that's a lot of fun too. But personally, I find it more fun to design creatures when their designs are representative of something and less literal, you know, plausibility science informing the design. Now these crystals down here, they're going to have that blue light that's being caught on them too. They actually have light hitting them from 2 different places. And one of those lights has a completely different color. So we can kind of add in this new color into these crystals, make them a little bit more vibrant. Again, I don't have to work too far into the details. I don't really want to work too far into the details because that is just not conducive to this kind of drawing challenge if I spend too much time. You know, it's one of those things where it's like when you're in it, you're like, oh, that's nothing. But then you zoom out and it's like, oh, it's actually doesn't need to be anything more than that. You know, honestly, that's pretty much it. Just crabs and shiny rocks. The prompt is jointed, and you know, the joint in question is kind of just crab joints. But yeah, other than that, it's pretty much just crabbies and shiny rocks. It was just sort of a visual. You know, that I mean, it's very indulgent. It's very much a me. It's very much a Jack Burke kind of design. But I pictured, you know, I was like, oh, this would be a good opportunity. You know, I'm always looking for opportunities to draw crabs. And I was like, this would be a good opportunity to draw a crab. And I was thinking, like, I can't always tell you exactly why I mean, again, like I was saying, like crystals and crabs, I feel like they kind of go hand in hand. I remember playing this iOS game when I was in high school, and I think a little bit in college too. And it was basically Cookie Clicker, but with crabs. So I can't really say I was playing it. I was attending to it. That's really the better way to describe it, because there really wasn't much of a game. But I liked it because it had these like crystal crabs. You were actually fighting the crystal crabs. The crystal crabs were the enemies. I don't remember exactly what you played as. Or no. You played as the crystal crabs. You fought against weird lizards. Let me see if I could find this. I don't remember what it was called. iOS game with crabs and lizards. Okay, it was literally just called Crab War. Yeah. And when I say lizards, like very abstracted, I think they just called them reptiles. But I liked the critters in this game. That's beautiful. It's a nice little piece of artwork there. Excuse me. Yeah, you know, it's like, it's kind of, I feel like it's kind of low-hanging fruit, but, you know, with these challenges, I like to get indulgent, and, like, I don't, as much as it seems like that's not the case, I don't always have an opportunity to draw an awesome crystal crab, and sometimes when the opportunity presents itself, you just have to take it. I think to kind of highlight the joints, since that is the actual prompt, jointed, take this kind of deep blue color, some blue highlights, and just kind of emphasize those joints there. It always helps if you have a part of your design that you want to look luminous. You know, like it's actually producing its own light. It always helps to put something really dark next to it and maybe even have that luminous bit, you know, cast light onto that dark part. But just in general, you know, color relativity, light relativity, you know, putting something light next to something dark makes it stand out more. So I want this sort of like glowing mouth bit to stand out a little bit more. Make the mouth parts around it a little bit darker. A lovely warm breeze blowing through my window right now. All my favorite drawing challenges take place in times of the year where the weather is nice. I don't think I would have the mental fortitude to do one of these challenges in the middle of winter. It's a lot easier to make art when you're feeling good. I mean, I guess it depends on the kind of art you make. Some people find it therapeutic to make artwork when they're sad, and I think I'd find that as well. It's much harder, but it can be very fulfilling. Trying to draw new art styles. And if you're trying to draw in a new art style, you should just look up some tutorials. I've been using a service called Artwad. That is ARTWOD. It's an online learning tool for art, specifically illustration. And they have courses on how to paint. And programs like that can really help you when it comes to learning a new skill. I would not recommend just kind of like going into it blind. I think it's something that you really need to have some discipline with. You need to really practice. You need to draw some things or paint some things that aren't maybe necessarily fun to draw or paint. Just do some still lives, do some life drawings, find some models, some humans, either real people in real life if it's possible, and if not, there are plenty of figures and models that you can find online that you can use to practice. But yeah, like kind of what I was talking about with lighting before, you really have to be aware of how light works in the real world before you can apply it to anything fictional, anything that doesn't exist in the real world. The rules of light and darkness are the same no matter where we are and what fictional universe we might be. And even if they aren't, you still have to understand how they work, period, in order to change the rules. And that's sort of, learning any skill in a nutshell. Like, you have to learn the rules before you can break the rules. You can absolutely break the rules. But unless you really understand the rules, you're not going to do anything productive by breaking the rules. It's just going to look bad. Do I have a favorite gemstone? You know, I was actually just talking about, I really like tourmaline. I don't think it's my favorite. I think opal might be my favorite. My birthstone is peridot, which I don't really think is visually that cool. Excuse me. I learned recently that some peridot is from space. Some peridot is formed, you know, under incredible like heat. You know, it needs incredible heat to be formed. Not all peridot, but some peridot comes from meteors, which is kind of cool. But not all peridot, so it's just not a particularly cool or pretty looking gemstone. I like ruby and sapphire, which are technically the same mineral composite. You know, they're both corundum, but you know, they look very different depending on how they're formed. You know, I like really bright colored gemstones. Citrine. Oh, what was that? That gemstone I learned about in Denver. There's this type of gemstone that grows in silver mines. And it's red and it's cubic. And it was so funny because we saw it. My sister and I were at a museum in Denver and we saw it. There were like 40 different displays that had it in it because they mine for silver. Silver mine gemstone. What was it called? Type of red gemstone that grows in silver mine. Rhodochrosite. This is it. That's pretty. Looks like watermelon. Ooh, that's cool. Crazy. Looks like rose petals. Yeah, that's a pretty stone. Oh no, I haven't taken a hand stretch break. That's a good point. I'll do a little stretch. Thank you for reminding me. Excuse me. Oh. I'm really into this one. You know, some of my sometimes when I'm working on an illustration, I'm not really feeling it. So you know, I get distracted, and well, honestly, I actually remember things better because I'm actually thinking about them consciously. But this one, I've really been kind of getting lost in the sauce a little bit in a good way. But if you do have any questions or any other remarks that you'd like to share with me in the comments, feel free, or in the chat rather, feel free to let me know. Sorry, I'm still not used to being to streamer talk. Citrine and amethyst are the same gem. That's not surprising, honestly. I mean, once I found out that ruby and sapphire were the same gem, I was like, oh, well, anything is possible. I was like, how could that be? Groudon and Kyogre are just the same, two different sides of the same coin. Some poetry in that, I think. I like jade too. I can't remember if jade is considered a gemstone or not. But I really like jade. Jade sculptures are gorgeous. Oh, I dropped it. I dropped my pen. Just saw Revenge of the Sith. What's my favorite Star Wars movies and or thoughts on Return of the Sith? Uh-oh, guys. Now, the ugly truth. I don't really like Star Wars all that much. I've only ever seen episodes... No, I was going to say 1, 2, 3, but I don't think they are 1, 2, 3. The original 3 movies, the original trilogies from like the 70s. I watched them with my mom because she liked them, kind of. But I remember when my mom showed them to me, she was like, you guys gotta watch Star Wars. It's really good. And I was like, alright, I'll watch Star Wars. And this was fairly recently. This was only about, well, geez, now it's probably about 10 years ago. But, you know, well after the Star Wars movies had come out. And so I sat down, I watched them with my mom. And we watched all 3 of them. And afterwards, I remember kind of just being like, I don't really like these very much. And my mom was like, yeah, they're not as good as I remember them being. So, like, I appreciate Star Wars for what it is, what it's done for movies in general. Although these days, like so many things, Star Wars just feels like a way to sell McDonald's Happy Meals and you know, just cross promotion with other big businesses. You know, it's just sort of become so popular that it's just a money making entity, not really a story in the truest and most honest sense. But a lot of big popular franchises are the same way, so I won't hold that against it. You know, I love Marvel, and you know, obviously Marvel is a gigantic cash cow. Kind of always has been. Well, no, it has been for a long time. So yeah, I won't hold that against Star Wars. But like, you know, I'm getting ads for like the Mandalorian and Grogu, and I'm just like, oh cool, I'm gonna go get a Burger King with the Mandalorian and Grogu. Like, I don't even know what the movie is about. I just keep getting ads for like Burger King. And like, I know that's how movies sell tickets these days, but it just kind of sucks, you know. I don't really remember any of the movies too well, or at least well enough to decide which one would be my favorite. I remember as a kid, before watching any of the Star Wars movies, I would watch one scene from, I think, one of the like the prequel movies, the trilogy from like the early 2000s, because I really liked General Grievous. I didn't know anything about him. I just liked the way he looked. I thought he looked cool. And so I would watch this scene where I think it was Obi-Wan Kenobi fighting General Grievous, and there's like a chase scene where Obi-Wan Kenobi is like riding on this like crazy like lizard monster, and I thought that was really cool. And then, you know, General Grievous has like all of the lightsabers that he took from Jedis that he's killed. I think I really don't know. I think that's what the deal is. I think that's his shtick. But I thought he was cool. I thought he was a cool looking character. I really don't know his lore. I don't know if he's like a robot or like a guy that they like rebuilt from, like, because I think he has a heart. I think there's like a scene where they like show like his little heart somewhere in its metal body. So I'm assuming he like was a living thing at one point. And like I know about Star Wars, like I know enough about Star Wars to like to talk about it. Like I know this is getting some deep Star Wars lore, but I know that Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father. I know that Rey is Han Solo. No, shit. See, now I don't know. I think Rey is Han Solo and Leia's child. I think. I know that everybody hates Jar Jar Binks, and that the actor who played him got like actually harassed in real life, which is kind of fucked up. I know that Han shot first. I know that this is pod racing. I'm not living under a rock. I'm familiar with Star Wars. I've never really gotten into Star Wars. Oh, I also remember going to see the Clone Wars. I think it was a show, but there was a movie also, a Clone Wars movie. I remember going to see that when it came out in theaters with one of my friends because he liked it for like his birthday or something. But I don't remember a damn thing about it. I remember having this conversation recently with one of my friends who is really into Star Wars, and we were talking about, because we were at sort of a Renaissance fair kind of event, and we were talking about how dressing up as a Jedi for a fantasy like cosplay event is not out of place, because Star Wars is really a fantasy story. It's not really sci-fi. Like, it has laser beams and spaceships, but the setting of the story is fantasy. There's nothing about the story that uses real life modern day science and sort of builds on that to create plot points and narrative and even technology. Like, even the laser guns and stuff that they have, like, they're not really based on any real science. The powers the Jedis have, they don't explain the science behind it, and if they do, it's like super, like, I know like the midi-chlorians, and right, like those are like, there's really not a lot of science to it, as opposed to like Spider-Man, where they really, it's all pseudoscience too, but they really, like, a big part of it is the radioactive spider and the different chemicals that they use and the different scientific methods that Peter has employed to create his web slingers. Star Wars is really fantasy.
people call it sci-fi because there are spaceships and laser guns, but I think really it is a fantasy story. Star Trek, I would say, is sci-fi. Star Trek is much more focused on, the actual pseudoscience of space travel, intergalactic politics, different species and their biology. I don't know a lot about Star Trek either, but I have a friend who likes Star Trek, and he's told me about how there are like plot points about like different species mating habits. I know there's like a whole thing where one of them, Kirk maybe, Captain Kirk, is like in heat, and they have to like take him to his homeland to mate or something. I don't know, I'm saying this out loud, and it sounds like maybe it's a fan fiction. If there are any Star Trek fans in the chat, let me know. Am I like, was I trolled? Is that like not an actual episode of Star Trek? My friend was just messing with me. Or maybe I'm misremembering it. My really nerdy, like my typically very stereotypically nerdy interest is Lord of the Rings. If we want to chat about Lord of the Rings, I am down to chat about Lord of the Rings. That's like my very stereotypical nerd. Well, I also a big nerd for dinosaurs, so I feel like that's pretty nerdy too. Not really into trains though. When I was a kid, I liked Thomas the Tank Engine, but then I found out about dinosaurs, and I was like, oh, this is kind of cooler. It's kind of cooler than stupid ass trains. Like, no disrespect. If you like trains, that's awesome. Go off, you do you. But TBH, I do not find trains all that interesting. I don't find trains not interesting. I definitely find trains a little bit interesting. But it is not like a typically nerdy interest of mine. Trains. Yeah, kind of. Trains are max dinos or kaijus. a big factor that turned me off to Thomas the Tank Engine, because I did really like it when I was a kid. The Thomas the Tank Engine movie. There was a movie. There are probably several movies at this point, but when I was a kid, there was a movie. It was like a big deal when this movie came out, and I went to go see it in theaters. Now, just for full context, I was probably 4 or 5. Let's look this up actually. When did the Thomas the Tank Engine movie? Thomas Tank Engine movie. Okay, Thomas and the Magic Railroad. Okay, this came out in 2000. So yeah, I was 4. I was 4 years old. I forgot Alec Baldwin was in this, because he was the voice. Is that the girl from Matilda? It is. Oh, the girl from Matilda was in this. I did not know that. But I went to go see it in theaters because I was very excited. I loved Thomas the Tank Engine. It might have been one of the first movies I had ever seen in a movie theater. It might have been the first movie I'd ever seen in a movie theater. And I was very sensitive to loud noises when I was a kid. I still am, honestly. I don't like loud noises, especially sudden loud noises. And I was not prepared for how loud a movie theater could get. And, you know, most of the movie is pretty fine. Like, it's loud, but it's, like, fun and happy. But there's a bad guy in that movie, and I believe his name was Diesel. And he was this, like, freight train that had this big mechanical claw on its back, on his back, I guess. They were gendered. And he would like crunch up other trains with his big claw. I don't really remember what his motivations were, why he was eating other trains. Maybe I'm misremembering that. Maybe he wasn't eating other trains. But he was crunching things with his giant claw. And it scared the shit out of me. I was actually so scared that I asked my mom to leave the theater. And we did, and I never saw the movie all the way through to the end. So don't ask me what happens in it, because I didn't last very long watching it. But yeah, I think after that, I was kind of like, hey, you know what? Maybe I'm good on Thomas the Tank Engine. Maybe this is actually too fucking scary, and I don't want to watch it anymore. Then, of course, because, dinosaur movies aren't scary at all. I remember, so the movie Dinosaur, the Disney animated movie Dinosaur, that came out, I believe, the same year, actually. I never saw it, probably because I knew I would be too scared to see it in theaters. But I remember one time I went to the dentist, and the dentist was playing it in his office, in the waiting room. And it came on, and almost immediately, in the very first part of the movie, if you've seen it before, there's this scene where there's a build up to this jump scare where this Carnotaurus comes tearing out of the forest chasing after this baby dinosaur. And, Carnotaurus, kind of a silly looking dinosaur, but in this movie they make them so horrifying. Like, they don't really look like real Carnotaurus. They kind of make them look like, well, I'll just show you. If you're not familiar, you should watch it, because I have watched Dinosaur more recently. It did come out in 2000. It's actually, I like it a lot. I think it's a very cool, interesting movie. Something that's really cool about it is that all of the environments in the film are actual footage. They're shot with a camera on location, but the rest of the movie is CGI. So it's almost like a documentary. So these are the Carnotaurus in this movie, and they are so scary. Even as an adult watching this, I was like, wow, that's horrifying. That looks real. That looks like a prop or like a ride or something. But yeah, they gave him these like gums and these red eyes and this horrible blood red coloration. And it was just terrifying. oh god, this scene is horrifying. I didn't make it to this scene as a kid, but like they're like stalking them through these through this like canyon, and there are these caves that they find them in. Oh, it's but it's a good movie. I like it. I think it's a very bold movie for the time. I know it didn't really do well. It was a bit of a flop. I know most people probably don't like it, but watching it as an adult, I think it's got a very potent, relevant message. A story about community and working together and appreciating one another despite our presumed weakness. And I think the thesis of the movie, and I might be extrapolating here, I might be being a little bit more generous than I need to be, but I believe the main thesis of the movie, what the creators were trying to say with the movie was, if dinosaurs had learned to work together instead of fighting for survival and competing with one another, they would still be alive today. And it felt like a direct message to the humans watching it, where it's like, we can't, to act self-interested and to act out of fear and to control and abuse and exert our power to get what we want is primitive. That's how dinosaurs did it. And look, where are dinosaurs now? They're gone. They're extinct. And it's just a really cool use of dinosaurs as a storytelling medium. We often use dinosaurs and prehistoric life as this sort of sobering reminder that these, majestic, powerful, beautiful, dangerous creatures can just disappear from the earth. Now, I know, yes, dinosaurs still exist. Birds are dinosaurs. I get it. But you understand what I'm saying. Dinosaurs, the age of the dinosaurs is over. And, the many different animals that lived on Earth, dinosaurs or otherwise, during those times are gone. And, that's always, I think, part of what interests us about dinosaurs in general is like, wow, that's kind of crazy that the world looked so different all those years ago. And that, so many of those animals are just gone and they're not coming back. And then, of course, then we have Jurassic Park, and then they do come back. But I think Dinosaur uses that to kind of say, like, hey, look, these animals went extinct, and here's a kind of a metaphor using those, using these animals as a metaphor, like, hey, maybe if they had worked together and been a little bit kinder to one another and be a little bit more accepting and tolerant and flexible, maybe they wouldn't have gone extinct. Now, of course, that's not a scientific, explanation. That is a poetic, metaphorical, symbolic description of this perspective on dinosaur extinction. But it is, I think it's potent. And I think in the early 2000s, a lot of people were kind of confronted with the possibility that humans will maybe not be around forever, that maybe we're destroying our chances at surviving as a species, destroying our planet, killing each other. And, in the 2000s and to this day, we still think about that. It's like, wow, maybe humans are just going to go extinct. Like, maybe in another million years, maybe even sooner than that, humans will just be fossils, buried deep below the earth, and some other species will reign, and they will remember us, but we will be gone. And I think using that kind of setting, the setting of the prehistoric Earth, to tell that story is quite potent. And they have these characters in the movie Dinosaur that are these lemurs. And the lemurs raise the main character, Aladar. And because he was raised by these lemurs, these primates, he knows compassion, he knows teamwork and love and acceptance, even if you are, maybe not useful to the tribe or to the pack or the herd or whatever. The lemurs still take care of each other. And, when he finally meets other dinosaurs, these sort of values are challenged. They're like, no, this is not how you survive. You survive by being ruthless and leaving behind the weak, and it's survival of the fittest, and you have to obey your ruler who knows best, and you can never question him. And, your ruler might be acting selfishly out of fear fear for his own life, fear that he might lose his power, but you don't question it. And I just think that, having these primates, these sort of primitive, nondescript primates, represent compassion and care, to me was sort of like, oh, these are the humans of the time. They are different from the dinosaurs. They are humans. These are the ancient ancestors of the humans. And like modern day humans, they survive by helping each other. And, that's eventually how, and the movie ends, the main crux of the movie is that there's this big asteroid that strikes the planet and everything starts to change. Food is less readily available, and there are, more predators that are more desperate for prey, and the herding animals, the herbivorous herding animals that are trying to reach the nesting grounds are having a hard time finding it because the landscape looks so different. And with the help of the main character, who is, who uses compassion and patience and tolerance and acceptance to guide the animals, they eventually do find the nesting grounds. But if they hadn't listened to him, they might have all gone extinct. So to me, the ending of the movie felt like, hey, here's an alternate reality where dinosaurs don't go extinct. They are able to find, this paradise where they can continue to breed successfully and create new generations, despite this massive asteroid that hit the planet and changed the environment so drastically. And they did it because they worked together. There was tolerance and love and acceptance, and I don't know. That's my interpretation of the movie. It's maybe a little bit. I feel like the reaction most people would have to hearing me go off on the movie Dinosaur is just, it's not that deep, bro. But I think it is. I think it is that deep. I think that was the intention of the creators of that movie. And kind of like Land Before Time. They're abstracting the actual dinosaurs on screen. They're not really supposed to represent any one dinosaur or another. I call them carnivores. Everyone else calls them carnivores because that's what they look like. Oh no, they do call them carnivores in the movie. I forgot about that. I feel like that's the only like species name drop in that, like, they don't call each other iguanodons or like baleen brachiosaurus. But they make them intentionally scary to represent this sort of threat of annihilation, this force that is another competitive force that is driving these animals to extinction, and like the rulers of even the herbivores, they are just fighting and killing to survive. There's also it's kind of crazy. It's part of the reason I feel like it might not be as popular of a children's movie is there's a lot of on-screen death, like actually being killed and eaten on screen. Which is kind of crazy for a Disney children's movie. Like, characters die on screen in Disney movies, but they usually fall off a cliff, or if they are getting killed, it's off screen. But Dinosaur, again, they really embrace the sort of almost documentary angle to it. And they don't really pull their punches. It makes it that much scarier. Oh, the creators wanted to end on a very tragic note. Oh, that's interesting. I mean, yeah, that would not work for a Disney movie. But maybe there was an alternate ending where they don't listen to Aladar, and they end up all dying. Or maybe maybe the original message of the movie was, even if you work together, it's still futile. We're all gonna go extinct anyway. Which I don't like that message as much. I don't like if that's the creator's intent. But it also felt like almost like weirdly political. Like it almost felt like, like it's kind of a socialist message where it's like we can't just have this almost like autocracy or oligarchy where it's just like a couple of people in control, that have been put into power and maybe don't even deserve to be in a position of power, but they maintain that power and they make all the decisions for everybody else. Where in an ideal, situation, an ideal political climate, we all take care of each other. We all share the burden. We all work together to ensure that everyone can thrive and prosper. And I don't know, maybe that was looking into it too much, but I could definitely picture, some writers at Disney in the early 2000s being like, we gotta create something beautiful. We gotta create something that's a lasting message for generations to come. But maybe not. I don't know if the ending was supposed to be more tragic. I'm curious to know what that ending might have been. Yeah. Well, Tarzan is another movie where I feel like it was a little unconventional. It was from that era in Disney where there wasn't quite as much of a formula for their stories, and they tried things that were, think about like The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Like that movie is like straight up not for kids. Not to say that it's like inappropriate or violent or anything, but just like the themes of that movie, the villain being this Catholic priest who is struggling with his own like carnal temptations. He is so consumed by lust that it forces him to genocide, essentially. Like that is a crazy motivation for a Disney villain. And I actually really like the movie The Hunchback of Notre Dame. What I don't like about it is that they tried to make it for kids with like the singing gargoyles and like all the like goofy like slapstick comedy. Like I think that movie would be much stronger if they didn't have any of that shit in it, or if they did like kind of just tone it down a little bit. Like I absolutely hate the scene in The Hunchback of Notre Dame where like Paris is literally on fire and the fucking Jason Alexander gargoyle starts singing about how it just turns it into a big comedic moment, and it's so tonally inappropriate for the moment. It just kills it. Some of the musical numbers in that movie are phenomenal. Mostly Frollo's numbers, and actually Quasimodo's number at the beginning. That's a beautiful song. And then, like, there are some Disney movies that are comedic and silly and fun for kids, like Hercules or Mulan. They find a good balance between, like, I'd say Mulan is more of a serious story than Hercules. But, they find a balance between, this kind of intense, heavy story and, fun comedic moments that break the tension. Because that is important in any movie to have a little bit of comedy here and there. I just watched the Backrooms movie, and there's some moments in that movie that genuinely made me laugh, that I thought were intentionally added to be funny. So comedy is an important part of storytelling, but you gotta temper it. You gotta figure out when it's appropriate and when you're just adding it to make it sell more for kids. I think the Prince of Egypt is another movie that suffers from that. Prince of Egypt has this weird musical number with the two like priests, and they're like trying to drive home that like the Egyptian gods are false gods, perpetuated by basically close-up magic artists, these charlatans who, basically fool people into believing in them. Whereas God, the Christian God is the one real God. And it's like kind of an interesting moment. It's also a kind of bold statement on behalf of the writers. But, for the sake of the story, it makes sense. But they turn it into a musical number, and like a comedy musical number, and it's really stupid. And like that movie is beautiful, and its biggest flaw is just that Bible stories just aren't very well written stories, and it's pretty faithful to the original Bible story. But other than that, it's a good movie. It's just it tries a little too hard to be kid friendly, and it suffers because of that. And I'm not saying that kids movies are bad. Like I think the Spider-Verse is a good example of a movie that is kid friendly and has complicated, sort of difficult themes. Themes that maybe are a little uncomfortable for anyone, but especially kids. His uncle dies on screen, gets shot and dies in front of him. Like, that's kind of crazy. But like, it is still fun. It is still, something that a kid can enjoy. There's a lot of action, a lot of comedy, but it's written for adults. It's not dumbed down to be like digestible for a very young audience. I think that's a good example of something that is fun for the whole family, so to speak. Brother Bear, that's another great movie that deals with some pretty heavy stuff, but is still, I loved Brother Bear when I was a kid. That's one of my favorite Disney movies. I'd say that Brother Bear is one of the most underrated, underappreciated Disney movies out there, and it's one of my favorites. I think that movie is phenomenal. A couple weeks ago now, we watched Brother Bear and Lion King back to back, and I was like, Lion King is good. I like Lion King, but Brother Bear is way better. And I can't believe I get it. I understand why Lion King is better, is more popular. The musical numbers are more exciting. They're catchier. The characters are very colorful and vibrant, and they have funny voice acting. And I think I think the musical numbers is part of what keeps Lion King relevant even to this day. And Brother Bear's musical numbers are phenomenal, in my opinion. Great Spirits is one of the best, if not the best, musical numbers in any Disney movie ever. And I love it. I think it's an amazing song. I think the opening sequence is amazing. And again, like, Lion King is good. Like, I have no problem with Lion King. It's a good movie. It definitely deserves to be as popular as it is, but I think Brother Bear also deserves to be that popular. Yeah, I've never watched the sequel. I kind of always assumed the sequel was terrible. It's just not a movie that needed a sequel. So when I heard there was a sequel, I was like, nah, I'm not interested in watching that. That's how I felt about Ice Age, too. I was like, why does this movie need a sequel? And why is the kid not a character in the sequel? But I eventually did end up watching, I think, all of the Ice Age sequels, and they were all horrible. A movie that didn't need a sequel but was actually a good sequel was Shrek. Like, I think Shrek 2 is just as good as Shrek 1. That's just a good movie. It has a lot of the same charm that I like about the first Shrek. Shrek didn't need a sequel, but the sequel was good. I liked the sequel. I like Shrek 2.
Thanks for that, tough guy.
Well, maybe one day I'll have to check out Brother Bear too. I know that there's like a love interest for Kenai, and that always just kind of turns me off, because it's just like, is that going to be the whole plot, that he needs a girlfriend? I always hate that. when the sequel to a movie that has nothing to do with like romance or like, you know, an actual like love story between two people in love. You know, Brother Bear is about love, but it's about brotherly love and, you know, compassion in general. It's not about, you know, finding, you know, the perfect girl for you. And just like, I don't know. I don't want the movie to be about like how Kenai is so awkward and he has to like date a girl bear. Like, yeah, also, like, is he going to turn back into a human or is he going to be a bear for the whole movie? Not to spoil the ending for Brother Bear if you haven't seen it. You should watch it, though. It's a great movie. And watch that movie and tell me if the opening musical number is not one of the best Disney musical numbers ever. Great Spirits goes so fucking hard. That song is awesome. All right. So this has been fun. And I'm glad that we got to sit and chat about crabs and movies. But I am finished with my crab illustration. And I am going to end the stream there. We've been going for... Hey, I did this in under 3 hours. That's what I was hoping for. So, mission accomplished. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to stream again tomorrow, make some more Kaijus. But for now, peace. I'll see you in the next one.